So imagine bombing your college entrance exams. Like, you fail so catastrophically that you suffer an absolute complete nervous breakdown.
Right, your brain basically just shuts down.
Exactly. You fall into this delirious fever dream for days. And when you finally wake up, you are absolutely convinced of one undeniable fact.
Which is that you are the literal younger brother of Jesus Christ.
Yeah, you are Jesus's little brother. Now, imagine that coping mechanism doesn't just end with, a weird diary entry. Imagine it starts a holy war.
A war that kills 30 million people.
30 million. And it brings one of the largest empires in human history to its absolute knees. Welcome to today's deep dive. If you are joining us, get ready, because our mission today is to unpack a massive stack of historical sources, records, and accounts to try and understand the Taiping Rebellion.
It really does sound like an alternate history novel, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. Or like the premise of a very dark, kind of absurd comedy.
Oh, totally.
But we're talking about a documented sequence of events that created the most gigantic man-made disaster of the 19th century.
And it all starts in a small village bedroom.
Right. A movement that began there and ended up entirely reshaping the geopolitical landscape of the modern world.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because to understand how a failed student becomes a self-proclaimed messiah, we have to start with the ultimate case of test anxiety.
The mother of all exam panics.
Yeah. I want to introduce you to a man named Hong Huaxiu. He's born in 1814 in Guangdong province into a Hakka family. And before we get to the exams, we really need to understand who the Hakka are.
We do, because his ethnic background is the engine for basically everything that follows.
Right.
The Hakka are this really fascinating demographic. The word Hakka literally translates to guest families.
Guest families.
Yeah, they are a subgroup of the Han Chinese, but they have a very distinct migratory history. Centuries prior, they were driven by wars and famine in northern China, so they migrated south.
But by the time they get to southern provinces like Guangdong and Guangxi, all the good land is taken.
Exactly. The most fertile valleys, the best agricultural lands, they were already claimed by the locals. And the Hakka called these locals the Punti.
So the Hakka are pushed up into these rugged hills and the mountains, right? They basically get the poorest, rockiest soil.
Precisely. They are totally relegated to the margins. And because they had to scratch a living out of this unforgiving terrain, the Hakka developed a highly resilient, insular, and just really tough culture.
Like, they had to be tough just to survive.
Oh, absolutely. For instance, unlike a lot of other Chinese groups at the time, Hakka women did not bind their feet.
Wow, really?
Yeah, they literally couldn't afford to. The women had to work the fields right alongside the men. So they were tough. They were often armed to defend themselves against bandits and, hostile Punti neighbors.
And I imagine they were pretty much looked down upon by the lowland elites.
Oh, completely. They were second-class citizens in a lot of ways.
So into this tough, marginalized environment, Hong Huaxiu is born. And his family, even though they are poor farmers, they recognize that Hong is bright. Like, he's a smart kid.
He shows potential early on.
Right, so they do what families have done for millennia. They pool every single resource they have, every spare coin, every favor, just to get him out of the fields and into the classroom.
His entire life trajectory is pointed at one singular target.
The Imperial Civil Service examinations.
The Kiju. And honestly, if you are listening to this, you have to completely divorce your mind from any modern equivalent you're thinking of.
Yeah, this wasn't the SATs.
No, and it wasn't the bar exam either. In Qing Dynasty China, the imperial examination was the sole singular path to social mobility, wealth, and political power, period.
It was everything.
It was a centuries-old system designed to select the administrative bureaucracy of the entire empire based strictly on merit.
But merit specifically in memorizing and interpreting classical Confucian texts, right?
Exactly.
We're talking about the 4 books and the 5 classics. Hundreds of thousands of characters of ancient philosophy that a candidate had to memorize perfectly.
Perfectly. And the testing conditions themselves were, well, they were basically psychological torture.
I read about this and it is horrifying.
They were grueling. Candidates would be locked inside these small individual brick cells.
Like, how small are we talking?
Often just large enough to sit in, but not tall enough to stand up in and not long enough to lie down fully.
That sounds like a solitary confinement cell.
It essentially was.
Yeah.
They would remain in these cells for 3 days and 2 nights.
Oh my God.
Completely exposed to the elements. They were given only the food and water they brought with them. And a bucket for waste.
Just sitting there for days with a bucket trying to write ancient philosophy.
The pressure was astronomical. Men occasionally went mad or literally died in those cells.
And the stress.
From the stress, the exposure, the exhaustion. And the pass rate for the lowest level of this exam, the Shenyuan, was less than 1%.
Wait, less than 1%? That is insane.
It was incredibly exclusive.
So you have this young man, Hong, carrying the financial hopes and the absolute social salvation of his entire extended family on his shoulders.
The pressure on him must have been crushing.
Crushing. So he goes to take the test, and he fails.
He fails in 1827.
And he tries again.
He fails in 1836.
And he tries a third time in 1837. And this third failure completely breaks him.
It shatters him.
I want to pause on that breakdown for a second, because the historical accounts say he was carried home on a palanquin, completely delirious.
He was completely incapacitated.
Right. He didn't just feel sad. He suffered a catastrophic psychological collapse. He goes to bed, falls into what is basically a feverish coma, and he has this extensive, highly detailed hallucination.
Or a vision, as he would later call it.
Right, a vision. What exactly did he see while his brain was basically melting down?
The specifics of his delirium are vital to everything that happens next.
Yeah.
While he's bedridden, Hong dreams that he is transported to this grand celestial palace.
Okay.
And he is met by a golden-haired, bearded old man wearing a black dragon robe.
A very specific look.
Very. He also meets a younger, middle-aged man in this palace, whom he instinctively addresses as elder brother.
Okay, so he's got this old man and an older brother figure.
Right. And in this vision, the golden-haired old man actually weeps. He laments that the human beings he created have been led astray, and that they are worshiping demons instead of him.
Okay, the golden-haired old man also tells Hong that his given name, Huaxi, violates certain celestial taboos, right?
Yes. He says the name needs to be changed. So the old man gives him a new moniker, Hong Zhuquan.
But my absolute favorite part of this fever dream, in a very dark, surreal way, is what happens to Confucius.
Oh, this part is incredibly revealing.
Right. Hong hallucinates Confucius, like the ultimate historical figure of Chinese scholarship.
The very architect of the exam he just failed.
Yes. He hallucinates Confucius literally being dragged in, scolded, and beaten by the celestial father for leading the people astray.
It is such a fascinating psychological moment. It reveals everything about Han's subconscious state at that exact moment.
How so?
Well, his mind has been pulverized by the Confucian examination system. So, to protect his ego from the devastating reality of his failure, his subconscious conjures a scenario where the ultimate authority of that system, Confucius himself, is physically punished.
He's being humiliated by a higher power.
Exactly. It's the ultimate rationalization.
It's like saying, I didn't fail the test's demonic, and a higher power thinks the guy who wrote the test is a total fraud.
That is exactly what's happening. Furthermore, in the dream, the old man hands Hong a demon-slaying sword and a seal of power.
A literal sword.
A literal sword in the dream. And he instructs Hong to cleanse the world of these demonic forces. Hong then spends the rest of his dream violently battling demons alongside his elder brother before his soul finally returns to Earth.
So he wakes up from this wild, violent, cosmic dream, and nothing happens.
Nothing happens.
He doesn't start a rebellion. He doesn't declare war. He just goes back to being a village tutor for 6 more years, which honestly baffles me.
It does seem anticlimactic.
Right. You have this profound, life-altering hallucination of being given a demon-slaying sword by a golden-bearded sky god, and you just go back to teaching grade school.
Because at that moment, it was just a strange dream to him.
Yeah.
He had absolutely no theological framework to interpret it.
It was just a crazy nightmare.
Exactly. It was a bizarre manifestation of extreme stress. He even continues to study for the exams, hoping to pass on his next attempt.
Oh man, he really couldn't let it go.
No, the social pressure was too great. It isn't until 1843, when he takes the exam for a 4th and final time and fails yet again, that the true catalyst occurs.
That 4th failure really seems to be the final nail in the coffin of his secular ambitions, because after this final defeat, a distant cousin of his named Li Jingfang comes to visit.
Yes.
And this cousin notices a dusty pamphlet sitting on Hong's bookshelf, a pamphlet that Hong had actually received years earlier, back in 1836 in the city of Guangzhou.
Right, and he had just tossed it on a shelf without really reading it.
The origin of that pamphlet is like one of the most remarkable synchronicities in history, isn't it?
It truly is. It was handed to Hong by an American Congregationalist missionary named Edwin Stevens.
An American guy just handing out flyers.
Well, he was preaching illegally in Guangzhou at the time. And the tract was called Good Words to Admonish the Age.
Good words to admonish the age.
Yes. Yes. And it wasn't just a short flyer either. It was a massive 9-part, 500-page tome written by an early Chinese convert named Liang Fa in 1832.
And Hong had just leafed through it and totally ignored it, probably because he was too busy cramming Confucian classics for his exams.
Most likely.
Yeah.
But now, in 1843, his worldview is completely shattered. He has absolutely no future in the Qing bureaucracy.
His dreams are dead.
Completely dead. So he sits down with his cousin to carefully read this Christian tract, and as he reads Liang Fa's translations of Genesis, Isaiah, and the New Testament, he experiences a profound cognitive reframing.
Oh, boy.
He maps his personal hallucination from 6 years ago perfectly onto Protestant theology.
Perfectly. It's kind of terrifying how well it fits.
It fits like a glove. He concludes that the golden-haired old man in his dream was God the Father. In Liang Fa's translation, God was referred to as Shangdi, the Lord above.
Okay, so the old man is Shangdi, and the younger man he called elder brother in his dream.
That was Jesus Christ.
Of course.
Therefore, Hong realizes with absolute certainty he himself is the second son of God.
I am stuck on the sheer audacity of this leap. Like most of us, when we hit rock bottom, maybe we change careers or, I don't know, take up a new hobby.
You might go to therapy.
Right. Hong decides he is the son of the creator of the universe.
It was a psychological defense mechanism that morphed into a terrifyingly absolute religious revelation. The text basically provided the vocabulary for his trauma.
Wow. That's a great way to put it, the vocabulary for his trauma.
And the demons his celestial father wanted him to destroy. Hong quickly identifies them not just as abstract evil spirits, but as the ruling Manchu government.
The Qing dynasty itself.
Exactly, the Qing dynasty who had conquered China 2 centuries prior and subjugated the native Han people. They were the demons.
So he officially changes his name to Hong Xiuquan, just like the dream instructed. He stops teaching Confucianism entirely. He actually throws his Confucian tablets out of his house.
A huge act of defiance in that culture.
Huge. But a guy with a dusty pamphlet and a wild dream doesn't spontaneously generate a massive movement all on his own.
Right.
He needs a congregation, right? He needs a theology that local people will actually understand and follow.
And that leads us to the unique religion he actually created. Because Hong did not simply adopt Orthodox Protestantism.
Not at all.
He synthesized it with the cultural bedrock of his region. We call it Taiping Christianity, but it was a deeply syncretic religion. It was this wild fusion of Protestant Christianity, Taoism, Chinese folk religion, and an intense millenarianism.
And millenarianism is the belief in like a fundamental transformation of society.
Exactly. The belief that the end of the current age is imminent and a paradise will be established on earth.
Wait, hold on though. If he's preaching that the Manchu rulers are demons, and his religion is based on a pamphlet handed to him by a white guy from America, how is he pitching this to local Chinese farmers?
That's the million-dollar question.
Because how does a foreign religion gain traction among people who are inherently and historically suspicious of outsiders?
That is the genius of Hong's theological framing. He didn't frame it as a foreign religion at all. He framed it as a restoration.
Oh, clever.
Very. Hong argued that in ancient classical times, the Chinese people had worshipped the one true God, Shangdi. He claimed that this original pure Han faith had been corrupted and displaced by Buddhism, Taoist idolatry, and especially Confucianism.
And he claimed the demonic Qing dynasty now used Confucianism to keep the Han people in chains.
Exactly.
So he's saying, I'm not bringing you a Western God. I'm bringing you back to the God of our ancient ancestors before these foreign Manchu invaders stole our true heritage.
Yes.
That is an incredibly potent political narrative dressed up as theology.
It really is. It provided a divine justification for ethnic nationalism. But to make this work, Hong had to seriously alter the theological roots of what he actually read in that pamphlet.
Right. Most notably, Taiping Christianity was strictly non-Trinitarian.
Yes, very strictly.
He outright rejected the divinity of Jesus, didn't he? He read the Bible and essentially said, wait, if Jesus is God and God is God, that's two gods. That doesn't make sense.
He took a highly literal, pragmatic approach to the text. Hong wrote that Christ is God's heir apparent, but is absolutely not God himself.
Okay, so they're separate.
He believed Jesus was an actual, distinct Son of God, a separate entity. Not a mere human messenger, mind you, but definitely not the Father.
Right.
Only God and Jesus could be described as Shang, or holy, and Hong strictly warned his followers never to use that term for him.
He was meticulous about the hierarchy. I read in the sources that he insisted his own title had to be written in an inferior physical position on the page compared to Jesus.
Yes, the typography of their texts reflected the theology.
So you'd have God the Father at the very top, you drop down a line for Jesus the Heavenly Elder Brother, and drop down another line for Hong.
The celestial org chart was physically represented in everything they wrote. But where it gets truly fascinating is how he adapted these abstract Protestant concepts into an extremely physical, hierarchical Chinese family structure.
This is the part that just blows my mind.
He applied the traditional Chinese family unit to the divine.
Because in Orthodox Christianity, God is an ethereal spirit. But in Hong's theology, the heavenly family is literal, like God is an old man, he wears a black dragon robe, and God has a wife.
The Heavenly Mother, and multiple celestial consorts, too.
Right, and Jesus, the Heavenly Elder Brother, also has a wife, the Heavenly Sister-in-law.
Yes, it's a fully fleshed out domestic situation up there.
Hong even claims that he and Jesus were born of the Heavenly Mother before heaven and earth even existed. And Hong has his own earthly son, who is officially written into the theology as the nephew of Jesus.
The nephew is Jesus.
It is a massive divine family tree.
It stems from his highly literal reading of the scripture that Shangdi created humankind in his image. To Hong, who was shaped by a culture where the family is the absolute fundamental unit of existence, a supreme being without a family was incomprehensible.
It just wouldn't make sense to him.
Right. This literal interpretation extended to the concept of divine filiation, the idea that believers become children of God. Hong took this to its absolute extreme by ranking his followers into the brotherhood.
So Jesus is the eldest brother, Hong Xiquan is the second eldest, but then he extends this to his earthly lieutenants, right?
Yes. As key figures joined the movement, they were literally slotted into this divine hierarchy.
Wow.
Feng Yunshan, the cousin who helped him organize the early movement, he becomes the third eldest son.
Okay, so he's the third brother.
Then a charcoal burner named Yang Zhuqing is designated the fourth brother. Wei Chongwei is the fifth, Xiao Chaoge is the sixth, and Shi Dakai is the seventh.
They literally built a corporate structure for heaven. And, I can see why this worked. He took a completely alien, imported text and translated it into the most universally understood concept in Chinese society.
Yeah.
Familial duty and hierarchy.
Exactly. If you respect your elder brother on earth, you must respect your elder brothers in heaven.
And they mirrored this celestial structure in their earthly community, too. The God worshippers treated their entire group as one massive literal family.
Yes, to enforce this, they established a common treasury where all private property was surrendered to the Heavenly King.
Everybody gives up their stuff. And the social rules were intense. They implemented incredibly strict rules of chastity, separating men and women into entirely different camps.
Total segregation.
Even husbands and wives were forbidden from sleeping together. Why would they do that?
Well, it served two purposes. First, it was a purification ritual. They believed they were cleansing themselves of earthly attachments to prepare for a holy war against the Manchu demons.
Okay, so spiritual boot camp.
Right. And second, strategically, if you sever traditional nuclear family bonds, the followers' primary loyalty shifts entirely to the movement and to Hong as the patriarch.
That makes a lot of sense. Control the family, control the followers. But to understand how this strict utopian religious framework turned into an actual army, we have to look at the power dynamics within that celestial org chart we just talked about.
Yes, this is where things get complicated.
Because eventually the lieutenants start to out-divine the leader.
The early expansion of the movement really reveals Hong's greatest weakness. He was a theologian, not an organizer.
He was a big picture guy.
Exactly. In 1844, he and his early convert, Feng Yunshan, the third brother, traveled to Guangxi province to preach. But by the end of the year, Hong gets discouraged and simply goes back home to Guangdong to write more theology.
He just leaves.
He basically abandons Feng.
And Feng Yunshan is the unsung hero of this entire rebellion. He is the true organizational mastermind. While Hong is back home sitting at a desk, Feng travels deeper into the rugged Thistle Mountain region of Guangxi.
A very dangerous area.
Yeah. He preaches, he converts whole villages, and he officially forms the God-worshipping society.
And Feng targets a very specific demographic, his fellow Hakka people. As we discussed earlier, the Hakka and Guanji were poor, they were constantly harassed by bandits, and they were locked in violent, localized conflicts with the Punti over land and resources.
So Feng is walking right into a power keg. He's talking to miners, impoverished peasants, and even local pirate fleets.
They were desperate for any kind of support.
Right. Entire Hakka clans are converting en masse.
Right.
And it's not just because the theology is appealing, but because the God-worshipping society offered them physical protection.
Yes, militant solidarity.
And a divine mandate that essentially said, you are not marginalized guests, you are the chosen children of God.
It provided absolute moral certainty to a desperate, heavily armed population. By August 1847, when Hong finally returns to the Thistle Mountains to resume leadership, the God worshippers number over 2,000 zealous members.
That's a huge jump.
It is. But the structure of the movement is about to face a massive internal crisis.
Right, because in January 1848, Feng Yunshan, the guy who actually built the congregation, gets arrested by local authorities.
A critical blow.
He is banished back to Guangdong. And Hong, demonstrating some really terrible leadership, panics and leaves shortly after to go find him.
So now, the God-worshipping society, this heavily armed, deeply zealous, militant group, is suddenly left without its founder and its chief organizer.
There is a massive power vacuum in the Thistle Mountains.
And nature abhors a vacuum. Into this void step two completely new figures, a former charcoal salesman named Yang Yuking and another early convert, Xiao Chaogui.
No, you have to explain the charcoal salesman, Yang, to me, because he doesn't just step up as like a temporary manager. He steps up with divine authority.
Yang Shukin was an illiterate Hakka who worked in the brutal, grueling charcoal burning trade in the mountains. This demographic was notoriously tough and prone to endemic respiratory diseases from the smoke.
It was an awful job.
Absolutely awful. But Yang was incredibly charismatic and highly intelligent. To seize control of the panic-stricken God worshippers, Yang begins claiming to enter deep physical trances.
Trances where he speaks for God.
Exactly. The Thistle Mountain region had a long tradition of local shamanism and spirit possession.
Oh, so he's tapping into something they already know.
Yes, he leverages this local cultural touchstone. He claims that when he falls into these trances, his own consciousness vanishes, and he is speaking directly as God the Father, Shangdi.
And Xiao Chaogui looks at Yang doing this and says, I can do that too. So Xiao starts going into trances and claims that he is speaking directly as Jesus Christ.
It creates a brilliant but deeply perilous theological loophole.
It's so audacious.
And to make it even more entrenched, Xiao's wife, Hong Quanjiao, fabricates an almost identical mythical story to Hong Xiuquan's original dream.
Wait, she claims she went to heaven too.
She claims she suffered a severe illness, her soul ascended to heaven, and the old man told her she was the Heavenly Father's daughter.
It's a complete copycat vision. She's essentially pirating the founder's origin story to legitimize her husband's faction.
That's exactly what she's doing.
But let's analyze the profound structural flaw this creates for the movement. By claiming to speak as God the Father and Jesus the elder brother, Yang and Xiao have technically just bypassed Hong's authority, right?
Absolutely. Think about the celestial org chart we talked about earlier. Hong is only the second son. He is the younger brother of Jesus.
So if Yang is speaking as the father and Xiao is speaking as the eldest brother, they can give direct orders to Hong Xiuquan.
Precisely. They have essentially hacked the theology.
That is wild.
When Yang speaks, Hong must kneel and obey, because a younger son cannot contradict the father.
Yeah.
It is a stunning usurpation of power by illiterate peasants over the educated founder.
It's literally like middle management suddenly claiming the CEO's boss is possessing their bodies and giving out the quarterly directives. It is an unbelievable power grab.
It really is.
But here's the part where I get completely lost. In the summer of 1849, Hong and Feng finally return to the Thistle Mountains. They see this happening, they investigate these trances, and shockingly, Hong validates them.
He does.
He formally declares that Yang and Xiao's trances are genuine. Why on earth would Hong validate the very people actively undermining his absolute authority? Couldn't he just excommunicate them?
That is the pivotal question of the early rebellion. From a pragmatic geopolitical standpoint, Hong likely felt he had absolutely no choice.
Because they had the numbers.
Yes. By the time he returned, Yang and Xiao had solidified total control over a rapidly expanding, highly militant base. They had kept the movement alive when it was on the brink of dissolution.
So if he calls them frauds, he loses the army.
Exactly. To deny their visions might have fractured the movement entirely, leading to mutual destruction. Furthermore, validating them kept the divine energy of the movement alive and centralized.
It made the magic real.
Right. It confirmed to the thousands of followers that God was not just a distant figure in a pamphlet, but an active daily participant in their struggle. God was literally in the camp with them.
But it planted a massive seed of internal conflict. He basically signed his own future death warrant by allowing rival power centers to operate under his roof.
It was a classic Faustian bargain. He secured his army, but he compromised his absolute authority, a flaw that would eventually tear the Taiping leadership apart in violent internal purges years later.
But for now, armed with these daily divine visions, a growing base of desperate Hakka followers, and a strict common treasury, the society officially transitions from a weird religious sect into a militant secret society.
The escalation is incredibly rapid. By 1850, their numbers swell from 2,000 to anywhere between 10,000 and 30,000 people.
That's a massive army.
And it wasn't just individual peasants trickling in.
Right, earlier you mentioned pirates.
Yes. Following the First Opium War, the British Navy severely disrupted the river pirate networks in southern China. Thousands of well-armed, battle-hardened pirates, like the fleet led by Luo de Gang, were suddenly looking for a new patron and a new cause.
They just join up with the god worshippers.
They folded their entire fleets into the society. You also had local mutual protection militias and bandit groups joining. The society was militant from its inception due to the prevalence of inter-village fighting in Guangxi, but now they were a veritable army, heavily armed and highly disciplined.
And this massive gathering of armed zealots obviously alarms the king authorities. In the summer of 1850, the government realizes this isn't just a local dispute, this is a burgeoning insurrection.
They finally pay attention.
They order the god worshippers to disperse and send a local military force to attack them.
The king expected to scatter a disorganized mob. Instead, the imperial troops are violently routed.
They got crushed.
The god worshippers fight back with terrifying ferocity and actually kill a deputy magistrate. The Rubicon has been crossed.
Which brings us to January 11th, 1851, which conveniently happens to be Han Shuquan's 37th birthday.
A highly symbolic date.
The god worshippers launch a full-scale open revolt against the Qing dynasty. This is the Jinqian Uprising.
The government responds by pulling together a massive force. They utilize the local Green Standard Army, which was the traditional Han Chinese constabulary force, and they even recruit rival river pirates to blockade the rebels in the town of Jinqian.
So they're boxed in.
The god worshippers are completely encircled and outnumbered roughly 10 to 1.
But they don't break. After a month of preparation, they launch a surprise offensive. They smash through the blockade, they completely rout the imperial forces, and they capture and behead the Manchu commanders.
It is a stunning, improbable victory.
In the wake of that bloody triumph, Han Shuquan formally drops any pretense of just being a religious leader. He declares the founding of the Taiping Heavenly, the Heavenly Kingdom of transcendent peace.
The Heavenly Kingdom.
We have to step back and look at the sheer scale of this shift. We've gone from a depressed guy reading a pamphlet in his bedroom, failing his exams, to an organized military force beheading imperial commanders and declaring a rival sovereign nation-state within the borders of China.
It signaled to the Qing dynasty that they were no longer dealing with localized banditry or a manageable peasant revolt.
This was the real deal.
They were facing a highly motivated, religiously fueled revolutionary force that explicitly sought to upend the entire social, political, and ethnic order of China.
Right. Hong began to explicitly describe himself as the Heavenly King and mandated that the ruling Manchus were Yao demons or monsters that had to be physically exterminated to establish paradise on Earth.
And the Taipings created this incredibly potent physical marker for their rebellion. They instituted a dress code of defiance.
Right. The hair. The Chinese populace started calling the rebels the long hairs. Now, to a modern listener, long hair sounds like, 1960s hippies. But in 1851 China, hair was a matter of life and death.
We really have to explain the Q. When the Manchus conquered China in 1644 and established the Qing dynasty, they issued the Q Edict.
Which was?
They forced all Han Chinese men to shave the front of their foreheads and braid the rest of their hair into a long pigtail, or Q, in the Manchu style.
The motto was literally, keep your hair and lose your head, or lose your hair and keep your head. It was a brutal test of submission.
Exactly. Yeah. Rejecting the Q was a capital offense. It was a highly visible declaration of treason against the emperor.
So by refusing to shave their foreheads and allowing their hair to grow wild and long, the Taiping rebels were physically embodying their rejection of king authority.
He was a brilliant, unmistakable uniform of defiance. You could look at a man and instantly know if he was loyal to the emperor or loyal to the heavenly king.
But as this massive, long-haired, demon-slaying army starts marching north out of Guangxi, capturing cities, moving toward the Yangtze River, the Qing Empire's leadership completely misunderstands what they are actually fighting.
They get it entirely wrong.
Which leads to one of the most tragic, consequential ironies of this whole story.
Yes. The Qing officials in Beijing and the regional governors trying to organize a defense look at this movement. They see a group that worships a single Western god, reads from translated Western tracts, and destroys traditional Buddhist and Taoist temples.
Okay, so they see Western influence.
Right. Based on this, the Qing state equates the god-worshipping society entirely with Catholicism.
Which is absolutely wild because, as we establish, they are reading Protestant pamphlets from an American Congregationalist.
Exactly.
They actively reject core Orthodox Christian tenets like the Trinity, and they view themselves as restoring ancient Chinese faith. The Pope would have been just as horrified by Hong as the Emperor was.
Nuance is often the first casualty of war, especially ideological war. The Qing establishment simply saw a Western god and lumped it all under the historical umbrella of Catholicism, since Catholic missionaries like the Jesuits had a much longer history of intervention in China, dating back to the Ming Dynasty.
I found a quote in the sources from Zheng Gufan. He was the imperial commissioner and a brilliant Confucian scholar tasked with destroying the Taipings.
A very important figure.
Right. He wrote a famous proclamation calling for local militias to rise up. He explicitly accused the rebels of having stolen the threads of foreign barbarians and venerated the religion of Catholicism.
Yes, Zheng Guofan's manifesto was a masterpiece of propaganda. He argued that the Taipings weren't just threatening the government, they were destroying thousands of years of Chinese civilization, morality, and culture.
So it was an existential threat to everything they knew.
Exactly. He literally put out a call to arms saying, "Those who are incensed by the rampant spread of Catholicism in the Central Plains and rise up in righteous fury to defend our way shall be honored in my staff."
But wait, how is it that despite all the highly localized Chinese folk religion mixed in, the golden-bearded god in a dragon robe, the trances, the Taoist elements, the Hakka cultural traditions, the kings still viewed this strictly as a foreign Catholic invasion of ideas?
Yeah.
Were their spies just really bad?
Well, it wasn't about a lack of intelligence gathering. It was about the ideological framework of the conservative Confucian scholars.
They just didn't care about the details.
To men like Zheng Guofan, the theological minutiae of Protestant versus Catholic versus syncretic hybrid didn't matter in the slightest. What mattered was the total rejection of the Confucian social order.
Right, they were burning the tablets.
The Taipings were burning Confucian tablets, destroying traditional shrines, and preaching a text that originated with foreign missionaries. To the Qing establishment, it was all an alien virus infecting the Han populace. They used Catholicism as a politically expedient catch-all term for Western spiritual subversion.
But that specific misunderstanding, that game of historical telephone, had a massive, devastating ripple effect later on, didn't it?
The profound and tragic one, yes. By officially and repeatedly branding this apocalyptic civil war as a Catholic uprising in their state propaganda, the Qing government sowed deep generational resentment among Confucian scholars and the general peasantry against actual Catholics.
So they blamed Catholics for the war.
Decades after the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom fell, people who harbored unimaginable trauma and anger from this war vented it on Catholic believers, Western missionaries, and Chinese converts.
You're saying this mischaracterization directly laid the groundwork for the Boxer Rebellion at the turn of the 20th century.
Precisely. During the Boxer Rebellion in 1899 and 1900, you saw violent, widespread attacks specifically targeting Catholic churches and thousands of Chinese Christians.
That is heartbreaking.
Much of that xenophobic rage was fertilized by the lingering, culturally ingrained belief that Western religion had caused the apocalyptic bloodshed of the Taiping era.
It's just layer upon layer of tragedy. Which brings us to the ultimate legacy of Hong Xiuquan's vision. We mentioned in the beginning that this was the most gigantic man-made disaster of the 19th century.
The scale is hard to grasp.
We have to talk about the sheer scale of the carnage because the numbers are almost paralyzing.
The human cost of the Taiping Rebellion is almost incomprehensible. The war raged continuously from 1851 until the fall of the Taiping capital at Nanjing in 1864, and smaller rebel factions fought on in the countryside for years after that.
And the death toll.
Estimates of the death toll range from 20 million to upwards of 30 million people.
30 million. That is more than World War I. And it wasn't just battlefield casualties between the armies, right? The civilian devastation was catastrophic.
Once the Qing dynasty eventually managed to turn the tide and break the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom, their reprisals were horrifyingly brutal. They didn't just arrest the leaders, they engaged in systemic ethnic cleansing.
They specifically targeted the Hakka people, who were seen as the ethnic core and the original instigators of the rebellion.
Yes, the massacres were indiscriminate.
The sources outline purges that are hard to even read. During the height of the Qing counteroffensive, imperial forces were killing 30,000 Hakkas each day throughout southern China.
30,000 a day.
In Guangdong province alone, a Qing official named Governor Ye Mingchen oversaw the execution of 70,000 people in the city of Guangzhou.
Ye Mingchen became known as the Butcher of Canton. The execution grounds in Guangzhou literally flowed with blood for months. The king's strategy was to eradicate the very soil that grew the rebellion.
It's estimated that 1 million people were eventually killed throughout central Guangdong as a direct result of these post-war purges. And this targeted violence sparked secondary conflicts, like the bloody Punti Hakka clan wars between 1855 and 1867.
Yes. The Punti, the local inhabitants who already had centuries of friction with the Hakka, were essentially given a blank check by the weakened Qing government to attack Hakka villages.
So they just let them slaughter each other.
These clan wars escalated into massive localized genocides, causing the deaths of another 1 million people and forcing hundreds of thousands of Hakka to flee overseas. It was a demographic catastrophe that reshaped the population of southern China forever.
If we pull back from the immediate carnage, what does this massive internal rupture do to the Qing Empire? Because they won, technically. Hong Yuquan dies in 1864, probably of food poisoning or illness during the siege of Nanjing, and his kingdom is destroyed. But the Qing dynasty looks like a dead man walking after this.
The Taiping Rebellion fundamentally shattered the illusion of Qing invincibility and permanently broke their monopoly on military power.
How so?
If we look at the mechanics of how the war was fought, the traditional Manchu military forces, the Elite Eight Banners, and the Han-staffed Green Standard Army were completely incapable of stopping the Taipings.
Why were they so ineffective? These were the armies that conquered China.
Well, over 2 centuries of relative internal peace, the Eight Banners had become deeply corrupt and militarily soft. They were an aristocratic caste, more interested in poetry and court politics than drilling.
And the Green Standard Army.
Underfunded, poorly trained, and riddled with opium addiction. When faced with the fanatic, disciplined, highly motivated zealots of the Taiping army, who forbade opium and fought to the death, the imperial forces completely collapsed.
So if the official imperial army can't fight, who actually defeated the Taipings?
To survive, the Qing court in Beijing had to make a desperate concession. They authorized local Han Chinese officials, primarily Zheng Guofan, to raise their own regional, privately funded militias.
Oh, I see where this is going.
Zheng created the Xiang Army in Hunan province. These were armies loyal not strictly to the emperor in Beijing, but to the local generals who paid and fed them.
That sounds like a massive structural flaw for an absolute monarchy. You're decentralizing the military.
It was a fatal shift. It shifted authority away from the Manchu center in Beijing and placed it directly into the hands of provincial Han warlords and scholars. The Qing dynasty technically survived the Taiping Rebellion, but they were mortally wounded. The central government lost its absolute monopoly on violence.
Which perfectly sets the stage for the next century of Chinese history. Because once the emperor doesn't control the army, the empire's days are numbered.
Exactly. It was the beginning of the end for the imperial system. The regionalism that defeated the Taipings eventually morphed into the fragmented warlord era that followed the total collapse of the Qing Empire in 1911.
It's all connected.
The Taiping Rebellion was the earthquake that fractured the foundation of imperial China.
It is staggering. You trace the timeline of the Boxer Rebellion, the fall of a 2,000-year-old imperial system, a rise of the warlords, the deaths of 30 million people, the complete reshaping of southern China's demographics, and it all funnels down to a single point in time.
It really does.
It all traces back to a guy sitting in a humid room in Guangdong, sweating over a Confucian exam, failing it for the 3rd time and having a nervous breakdown.
It is a profoundly sobering reminder of how volatile human history can be. We often look for massive structural causes for massive events. But sometimes it is simply a collision of extreme personal stress, a highly restrictive, unforgiving social system, and the introduction of a radical new idea at precisely the wrong, most fragile moment.
It's been an incredibly heavy, wild journey today, moving from a rejected scholar's bizarre hallucination to a continent spanning holy war with a literal heavenly family. We want to thank you, the listener, for joining us on this deep dive. We know it's a dark, complex chapter of history, but understanding the mechanisms of how these massive historical fires actually ignite is just so crucial to understanding the world we live in today.
Indeed. The mechanics of belief combined with systemic desperation are incredibly powerful forces. When a population feels they have nothing left to lose, a spark is all it takes.
Before we go, we'll leave you with this one lingering thought to mull over. We talked about how Edwin Stevens handed Hong that pamphlet in 1836, and it sat on a shelf totally unread and misunderstood for 7 long years.
7 years of gathering dust.
Right. It only became a catalyst for tens of millions of deaths because it was picked up on the exact day Hong's worldview finally shattered. So, as you look around your own house today, ask yourself, how many world-altering texts or revolutionary ideas are just sitting quietly on someone's dusty shelf right now, waiting for the exact wrong moment to be read? Think about that. Until next time.